Recognized for her 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. General Garland, thanks so much for being here today. I know it's been a long day for you. Now, I'm relatively new to the committee, and I'm still getting my feet under me, but as far as I can tell, what we are doing here today is talking about a lot of conspiracy theories, and it's frustrating and tedious for those of us in the committee, but I can tell you it is absolutely maddening for my constituents back home in Vermont. We have so much important work to do to keep the government open. We're days away from a shutdown, and I just want to remind folks that we're in this situation because my colleagues across the aisle are reneging on a deal that a majority of their conference made along with their speaker. That's why we are in this situation. If they are successful in shutting down the government, seniors who rely on Social Security benefits will be impacted, thousands of Medicare recipients and applicants will be impacted, service members will stop receiving paychecks, veteran services will be curtailed. Those are the grim consequences from Republicans' inability and unwillingness to govern. I needed to start with that. Let's do some level setting here. Now, let's get to the real work of the DOJ and how Congress can help the agency better serve its mission. Gun violence continues to plague our nation. We see the wreckage every day on our television sets, on our computers, and in our communities. As a member of the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force, this issue is incredibly important to me and so many of my constituents. Now, I believe there's actual room for bipartisan congressional action on gun violence, at least in some areas. One of those areas, red flag laws. It's a great place to start. Vermont is one of 21 states that was able to pass red flag laws. These laws are working to keep guns out of the hands of people who are in crisis. And yet, many states did not even apply for funding from the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act to better implement red flag laws and to raise awareness about the program. In June 2021, DOJ published model legislation to help states craft their own extreme risk protection order. Now, Republicans continue to make unfounded accusations that these laws violate civil rights by taking guns away from Americans without any due process. Can you explain the due process protections that are put into place in the model legislation that DOJ proposed?
Yes, and I would start by saying, of course, there's room for bipartisan agreement, and the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act is a very good example. And that includes the ability to have funding for states that want to craft and put into place red flag laws. The requirement is that the red flag law include due process protections. So I don't know every element of the model legislation, but the general idea is that relatives or friends of the person have to go to a court and get some kind of adjudication that the person is a danger to themselves or to others. This normally relates to mental illness problems. It may relate to some others. And so if a gun is taken away under those circumstances, there's then a right to appeal, to have a full hearing in order to adjudicate the question. That's I can't say I know every technicality, but I think that's about it.
No, I appreciate that. And it's especially important to states like mine, rural states that have real issues with the silent killers, domestic violence, and also suicide. And so these are instances in which red flag laws can really make a difference. Shifting gears here, I, along with Senator Warren and 20 of our colleagues, recently submitted a comment letter applauding the draft merger guidelines and urging agencies to finalize them. Corporate concentration remains a pressing problem for the U.S. economy, and I fear that we're falling behind in this area, and American consumers continue to feel the pain because of this. With the introduction of the draft merger guidelines, how does the department plan to ensure that future mergers and acquisitions do not stifle competition or harm consumers? Because that's often the pushback that we get.
Yeah, I think obviously the intention of the merger guidelines is to set forth the enforcement policy of the department. The different generations of the guidelines, which I hate to say it, go all the way back to the time when I was in law school, have been adopted and or been helpful to generations of judges. I've sat on at least 2 or 3 merger cases myself where we use some of the learning from the merger guidelines, and the current guidelines reflect really an adjustment to the current technology, two-sided platforms, network effects that simply did not exist at the time that the last set of merger guidelines were passed.
Thank you, Attorney General. Just briefly in closing, last year you spoke on the subject and said that DOJ's enforcement against corporate crime has waxed and waned, but it's waxing again. That is news to my ears. Thank you so much for your service. I yield back.
Lady